Hello and welcome to Heroes and Humans of Football. My name is Mehreen Khan.
And I'm Simon Cooper. This is the football show where we take the hero and we show you the human.
From Johan Cruyff to Megan Rapinoe.
And from George Best to Kylian Mbappe.
This is the Human Football Podcast. Last week's episode was on Hakan Şükür, the man who went from being a national footballing hero to an Uber driver in the US. Be sure to check it out.
Hello and welcome to Heroes and Humans of Football. I'm Simon Cooper.
And I'm Mehreen Khan.
You may hear, the more perceptive listeners, that Mehreen's voice is not as it always was. She's lost a bit of it. She's just back from the IMF meetings in Washington. And when you hobnob with the Masters of the Universe...
Yeah, I was partying pretty hard with the Masters of the Universe. Got a bit rowdy, so we sound quite gravelly.
Yeah, so I'm thinking today maybe we'll hear a bit less of you than usual and just leave the...
I think I sound far less annoying than I usually do, let's put it that way.
Remains to be seen. Today, a very sad day because we're here to mourn the departure of Jürgen Klopp in his final days at Anfield with Liverpool after 9 years there. Jürgen Klopp's story is a story about how to be a leader in a time when so few leaders are respected, if you think of our political or business leaders. And if you just throw away your airport business books and study Jürgen Klopp, you can see a different way to get people behind you, to lead not just a club, but a whole city.
Make sure you stick around to the end of the episode where Simon and I are going to be telling you what Klopp is going to do next. But before we get to that, let's talk about his look.
So what's your take as an expert?
I think that he, of all the managers we've spoken about, has had the biggest glow up.
Wait, glow up. You're going to have to explain the word glow up to those of us over 25.
Okay, so glow up, how do I put it in polite terms, is that if you're considered to be a bit of an ugly duckling when you're younger, and then as you age, you become far more attractive, almost unrecognisable, I would put Jürgen Klopp as in having a tremendous glow up in his 40s and 50s compared to his earlier days. A lot of it's fake, right? So he's had his teeth done. You can now see his teeth from like the moon.
Yeah, that's right.
Right?
I think he might have the best teeth, even in the Liverpool squad, where they all went to the same dentist and they have very high level teeth.
Yeah, the hair transplant, which I didn't know about, but you say he's definitely had a hair transplant. He got laser eye surgery, which I think was a little bit unsuccessful because I think the glasses were doing a lot of work for him.
Yeah,
but he doesn't wear glasses
were a prop.
anymore.
I don't think he needed them.
He doesn't need them. And I don't know, I feel like he's also uses a tanning machine because he lives in Liverpool and he really has taken on the Scouse aesthetic. He's really imbibed the culture of what it is to be living in Liverpool.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, this is the only way is Essexization of Jürgen Klopp's face.
One of our studio producers points out that he has a Scouse girlfriend and we may have offended a whole region of England like nobody else has done since the Sun newspaper. So I'd like to point out that all those remarks are by Mehreen, not me.
But the thing that really strikes me about Klopp is that we've done other managers, namely Pep, and with Pep, the sort of framing of our episode was that is there a trade-off between being a GOAT, the greatest of all time, and also being a human being? And it strikes me about Klopp, there doesn't seem to be a trade-off at all. He's up there with the greatest, but his humanity is the thing that he really wears on his sleeve. He goes in front of the cop, he pumps his chest, he loves crying, he's brilliant when they win, and he's also brilliant when they lose.
I think he might be the best crier in modern football.
Yeah, and probably the best manager you want to deal with defeat. When you're a club that's on its knees or you've suffered a terrible injustice on the pitch, Klopp just has this ability to make you feel like it's going to be okay. And even in defeat, I think it's in defeat that where he gets most of the qualities that have meant that he is worshipped and adored, I think, in a way that Pep and Ancelotti and perhaps even Ferguson never really managed. Obviously, Wenger not either. There's something quite special about him, which means that he's a cultish figure at the clubs that he's managed.
More than anyone we've discussed so far, he really is both hero and human. I see him as a kind of patron saint of this podcast.
Okay, so Jürgen Klopp is not a man that can be captured purely through statistics, but Simon, let's have them anyway.
Well, he spent 7 years at Mainz, his first club as a coach. He spent 7 at Dortmund, and now he's finishing 9 at Liverpool, so he's a fairly kind of long-term monogamist. He has never been sacked, won 2 German titles, 1 English title, unfortunately during the coronavirus. He won the Champions League in 2019, and beyond that, he reached 4 out of 10 Champions League finals in a decade through 2022. Lost 3 of them, but still, you know, this man was up there among the greats of European football for a long period. He's now 56. Will he ever manage a club again?
But that's all for the future. Now let's go back and think about how Jürgen Klopp grew up. Simon, tell us about his childhood.
Well, he comes from the Black Forest in southern Germany. He grows up in a village that's quite high above sea level. And his dad, Norbert, is a salesman, I think, in leather goods. But Norbert loves sport, and his dream is for his son to become a professional athlete. So he's a kind of football dad, puts massive pressure on Jürgen to become a star in sports. And Norbert coaches him in tennis, in football, in skiing. When they play tennis, Norbert always tries to win. When Jürgen plays football, Norbert is one of these dads who's shouting from the touchline at his kid, not what you're supposed to do.
I think dads are becoming one of the most important variables in the stories of most of our protagonists. There's always a dad.
Yes, and often it's the dad who has this dream of a football life that often the dad himself would have liked to have had.
Are you a football dad?
I do not shout when I'm there. I do not talk. I watch them and
You do not talk?
Well, I reluctantly talk to the other parents, but I afterwards lecture them about tactics and positioning.
So Klopp, he's Swabian. And it's quite an interesting mythical place in Germany, and particularly for me in my day job, writing about economics, where the Swabian housewife has become a bit of a trope. And this is the idea, which was immortalized by a former German Chancellor, Angela Merkel, that the Swabian housewife is a very, very hardworking and thrifty woman. And it's almost like this caricature of how Germans think about what it means to be economical, that you save lots of money, you work very, very hard, and you don't spend in profligate ways. And actually, this is a region which has produced some pretty notable figures, some of which we're going to talk about in future episodes.
Thomas Tuchel.
Yeah, Jürgen Klinsmann and Ralf Rangnick also share similar Swabian roots with Klopp.
Swabia is a southern German region. It's very wealthy, and as you say, it's quite conservative. When I studied in Berlin, the start of the 90s, the story in Berlin was that the Swabian kids would run away to Berlin to escape their strict Catholic, repressive, obsessive spring cleaning parents.
So we've offended Scousers and Swabians.
Yeah, let's keep going.
Okay,
yeah.
Let's see how many more we can manage.
And Klopp is also is actually quite conservative instinctively about spending money. People who have watched him spend huge sums at Liverpool will laugh, but a couple of years before Liverpool starts spending, United buy Paul Pogba for a huge sum. And Klopp's all moralistic or Swabian about it, says, I would never pay that much money for a player, even if I had that much money. And then a few months later, he's buying Virgil van Dijk for, I think, 85 million quid. And Mourinho says, it's interesting given what he said a year ago.
He's always there, Mourinho, ready to pick up everyone's hypocrisy.
Mourinho loves it when people go against their principles, like Klopp here, because Mourinho is really proud of not having any principles.
And he's cynical about all human nature, so he thinks everyone's a hypocrite. And he loves it when they smoke themselves out.
Yeah, he thinks everyone is as unprincipled as he is.
But we spoke about his father, but actually it wasn't always an easy relationship between Klopp and his dad.
No, he says being raised by Norbert, it was a far cry from being fun. But luckily, he was just about good enough to become a professional footballer. And he says, it was the first great fortune of my life to do exactly what my father wanted to do. I lived the dream he had dreamt about. Any other job for me would have caused friction. I should acknowledge at this point these two excellent books on Klopp that I've been reading by Elmar Neveling, German journalist, and Anthony Quinn, who's a British writer who did a lovely sort of Liverpool fans view of Klopp. He never becomes a very good player, but he does turn pro and he bumbles around a couple of small clubs, impresses, and then he gets to Mainz in 1990s, in his early 20s. Mainz is a city where he'll spend the next 18 years, so it's a huge chunk of his life. It's not really a football town. It's quite a wealthy small town in southwestern Germany, now best known for the place where the BioNTech Pfizer COVID vaccine is invented, not for its football club. He becomes a kind of stalwart pro at Mainz, and he sets the club record for appearances in the second Bundesliga. He plays 325 games in Germany's second
It's like the James
division.
Milner of Bundesliga too.
Yeah, but sort of many categories below James Milner. Klopp becomes a kind of stalwart player in a not very good team, first playing up front, and then very weirdly, he kind of gradually moves further backward. He's massive and he's quite quick, but he can't really play football.
And as he loses pace, they decide that the best thing to do is actually, obviously, of course, move him back further and further down the pitch, the slower that he gets, which I think is quite interesting for a manager because effectively he's played most positions on the pitch. I don't think I can remember a professional footballer who spent a lot of time as a striker and then spends a lot of time as a defender. It's not like he makes a transition when he's young. He does it in the middle of his professional career.
Yeah, I mean, it's also a little bit like being a very cut-price Jude Bellingham who can play every position. Klopp apparently could play every position, but not
Klopp
well.
was versatile before that was a thing.
I mean, he says, he's got a good brain, which helps, I suppose, the versatility, but he doesn't have good feet. He's very good at dissing his own playing career. He said, unfortunately, as a player, I wasn't able to do on the pitch what was happening in my head. I had the talent for the 6th tier Landesliga and the brains for the Bundesliga.
He goes on to say, I stuck around like a bad smell. On Saturday afternoon, people would go to the stadium and Klopp will be there. Again, for 11 years, they would watch me every single weekend, whether they wanted to or not.
And so he spends this massive amount of time in the Mainz first team, sort of unknown outside the city. I mean, who cares about a second Bundesliga guy? And then in 2001, he's coming to the end of his career and Mainz are not doing well. They need a new coach and they look around and they leaf through football almanacs and they can't find anyone they like. And so in the end, they say to Kloppo, we should say, as a kid in the Black Forest, he's known as Klopplo, which is the local diminutive. And then at Mainz, he becomes Kloppo. And they say, Kloppo, why don't you become the coach? You know, you're not stupid. You know a bit about football.
You're hanging around like a bad smell.
Yeah, maybe we can get you off the pitch this way. And he's so excited because when they say it to him, he's like, yes, I've been waiting all my playing career to become a coach because I know I will do this well. And so his transition from player to coach, which normally takes years, in his case, it's about 3 days. And even after that, he occasionally comes on as a sub.
Player manager.
He comes on as a kind of big man to put pressure on when you're losing 1-0 at the end.
But even though he is a Mainz stalwart and everyone knows him, the news of his appointment doesn't go down particularly well. And one of my favourite stories about his announcement as manager is that most people in Mainz thought that it was a practical joke.
Well, it was during Carnival, which, you know, in southern Germany is kind of the most important
right?
thing in the year.
It's a big deal. People have horrendously outrageous floats, often very, very offensive and anti-Semitic, as far as I can tell, covering this part of the world sometimes.
Fancy dress, yeah.
But they all get hammered, right? The whole point of Carnival is that everyone in the town is spending a lot of time drinking. And one of my favourite anecdotes is from a local journalist at the time who had spent most of the week getting hammered. And on Friday morning, he opens his paper and sees that Kloppo suddenly has become Mainz manager. And he thinks clearly the club has taken Carnival week a bit too far, like an April Fool's. And this is a joke.
Yeah, and when they have the official press conference to announce the new manager, and they say, well, it's Kloppo, there's like 7 journalists in the hall and they all burst out laughing.
Yeah, they take the piss.
Yeah, no, they think it's hilarious. Klopp realises, you know, he gets lucky. He said, you know, if you're a mediocre player in the second Bundesliga, if you get to be a coach, if you're lucky, it's like in the 5th division. And suddenly he gets to coach the second Bundesliga team, partly because they were going to get relegated anyway. Miraculously, they stay up. I think they win 6 of their first 7 games under Kloppo. And so suddenly he's a coach. And he knows exactly how he wants to do it. In German football at the time, the thing is to play with a libero, a sweeper behind the back 4. It means that you're a player short in midfield. And there are coaches who say, no, we must play with the back 4, extra man in midfield, and then we press. We don't do man marking, we do zonal marking. That's the new football. And Klopp is entirely of this school. This
is the Ralph Rangnick school, probably a figure that we're going to talk about in future episodes.
Rangnick is one of the influences on him, but more important, I think, is a figure called Wolfgang Frank, now forgotten coach who coached Klopp at Mainz. This is how he's going to do it. The Klopp game we know from Liverpool, what he calls heavy metal football, is already completely present at Mainz 20 years ago, just played by bad players, but the same style. It works very well. And
one of the other things that is been continuous throughout Klopp's managerial life is that he also is incredibly charming, loved, and likes cracking a joke or two, and is very able to get people to get on board with him very quickly.
And he would use his charm to enormous effect as a manager. So he'd call a player who was much too good for Mainz, and Klopp would say, oh yeah, man, come to Mainz, we want you here. And the player would think, I'm not going to go to Mainz, you know, second Bundesliga club going nowhere, middle of nowhere. And after 5 minutes on the phone with Klopp, they'd say, yeah, man, I want to come to Mainz. I'll be there tomorrow to negotiate the contract. I'd love to. And then they come to Mainz to negotiate the contract. And the club says, oh, well, we can't really pay you anything. And the deal would fall through. This happened repeatedly because Klopp would be able to charm anyone. And this negotiation is an interesting thing. So what I've heard from someone from Mainz is that when you negotiate a contract, and this may be good advice for you in your career, which I hope will get better than it is now.
Than it is now, yeah.
Is when you negotiate a contract, you have to go in fully prepared. You have to know what people like you are earning, and you have to have your bottom line, the figure at which you'll say, no, I'm not taking this job and I'll walk away. So you have to do a lot of homework before you negotiate. And Klopp didn't do any. He'd just walk in. He'd say, okay, man, so what are we talking about? And the Mainz people would say, well, you know, Jürgen, this is what we're thinking. And Klopp is so quick at picking up information and at reading people that without any preparation, he was a master negotiator, because he'd read the other person, he'd charm them the right way. And so even at this small club, he very quickly became the best paid coach in the second Bundesliga. So even in the second Bundesliga, he was earning a 7-figure salary, partly because he was just so charming and everybody loved him, and partly because he was an excellent negotiator.
But his squad was made up of basically journeymen, free transfers, and I think at his peak was worth something around 600,000 euros. So he is earning a huge amount of money and taking a big chunk of the club's budget. Well, it pays off.
It does. I mean, they have a couple of last-minute failures to get promotion to the Bundesliga. Twice in a row, I think they miss promotion.
They miss out by a point, and then they miss out on goal difference.
Yeah, and there's a lot of crying, especially by Klopp. And then they're up for promotion again, and he puts a banner up in the changing room that just says, "Yeah," with like 20 A's, and they get promotion.
He's a cult hero in Mainz for his time that he's there. But also during the latter part of his tenure, he does become known by Germans. And if you look at Klopp is perfect for television. And actually it's television that is the thing that gets him fame and notoriety throughout Germany.
Yeah, well, one of the big German TV channels, the ZDF, is based in Mainz. And so they realize, the local manager here, nobody else in Germany knows who he is.
Good value, yeah.
He's an amazingly charming, brilliant talker. So why don't we do something wild and put this unknown coach on the World Cup 2006 TV shows with Franz Beckenbauer, who, of course, is the god of German football. It's a crazy idea in that Klopp is totally unknown, but they realize, he's star material. It's like the first time James Dean walks onto the screen, everyone thinks, oh, right, I've never heard of this guy before, but he's a star. And so it's the same with Klopp. At the World Cup 2006, when I'm going around Germany, suddenly everyone in Germany becomes aware of him. And I'd studied in Berlin, so one of my Berlin friends, when I was there during the World Cup, says, I've got tickets to be in the studio audience at the ZDF football show after the match. So come along with me and we'll be in the studio audience. And so I'm sitting there, and I remember this very clearly. There's this tall, lanky, blonde guy on stage with this massive smile. And in my memory, he's wearing just T-shirts and jeans. And he's explaining the World Cup match we've just seen. It's so funny and so understandable. He's explaining the tactics. It's both very insightful and it's totally accessible. You just love this guy. You think, I want to watch every show he's on. Mm. And whenever he starts to speak, the studio audience is kind of leaning in and coming alive. And at this point, I'd never heard of Jürgen Klopp before. And I did not foresee a brilliant managerial career, but I thought, wow, what a guy. And that's what everybody in the audience thinks that night.
So he becomes hugely famous in Germany, and all German football fans now know about this guy, and not just Mainz fans, which makes his departure, I guess, from his hometown club even more painful when it happens.
Yeah, he stayed 7 years at Mainz. But, later they get relegated again. I mean, not a disgrace to get relegated from the Bundesliga with a club that's not really a Bundesliga club. When he finally leaves Mainz, and this is a pattern in his relationship with clubs, the relationship is very long, it's very loving with every club. Everyone wants him to stay, and that means nobody wants to sack him. Mm. So the only person who can sack Klopp at all his clubs is Klopp himself. So he sacks himself at Mainz. He says, I failed to get promotion, so I must be sacrificed, I must go. Sort of classically what
I'm
they say
sucking up
about
way
you.
too much of the budget of this club.
Yeah, this club needs to progress without me. Finally, after 7 years, he's the most beloved figure in Mainz. He sacks himself and leaves.
And there's this amazing foreshadowing, which is the last day of his final match in his last season at Mainz. He's told everyone he's leaving, and he's crouching down on the pitch after the final whistle. And the Mainz fans do a rendition, a heavily German accented rendition of You'll Never Walk Alone.
Which they do as You Never Walk Alone.
Yeah, well, now we're offending everyone in Germany too.
Right, let's keep going.
He's sort of taking it all in with a little tear streaming down his face. I don't know whether that is a song that Mainz adopted, or whether maybe Liverpool was always going to be his destiny. It's quite a powerful clip. You can watch it on YouTube.
Yeah, so all the departures from all the clubs go the same way. It's this kind of mass adoration of this crying figure, who hasn't even won at the end, but is still, nobody wants him to go. So he goes from Mainz to a much bigger club, Dortmund, in the Bundesliga, not in a great phase at this point, but historically one of Germany's great clubs. And It actually has a lot in common with Liverpool. It's in one of the poorer regions of Germany, post-industrial, the Ruhrgebiet, which historically there was a lot of mining. That's gone. Football is tremendously important. Sense of community is very important. And Dortmund often have the biggest average attendances in Europe, 80,000 people. And they have this famous yellow wall, the Gelbe Wand, where you have thousands and thousands of people standing on the Südtribüne. And it's a brilliant sight. It's just a place where football is completely alive.
Klopp is now at every hipster's favourite club, Borussia Dortmund. It's the first big club that he's going to manage. And at this point in his life, he's probably already developed the playing style that we know is going to be a perennial theme in his managerial life. And he's also developed and shown off a lot of the personal charisma that mean that people in Germany know about the guy. And of course, the ones that he managed in Mainz love him unconditionally.
And at this point, when he comes to Dortmund, he's asked by Stern, a German magazine, what counts in life? And Klopp says what counts is that wherever you were, you made it a little better, that you gave all you could, that you loved, were loved, and didn't take yourself too seriously. I think one thing we see here is, it's a beautifully expressed creed, but we also see his gift for words. He always finds the right, simple and beautiful words to convey to people what they need to know or to express how they're feeling. There's something a little bit Winston Churchill about Klopp, in that these leaders who find exactly the right words get a surprising amount of effect for that.
Almost as soon as he arrives in the door at Dortmund, he makes an impression, not just on the players, but on everyone in the club, including, I guess, lowly workers in the canteen. And there's also a great story about him and a press officer, Simon.
Yeah, this is from Anthony Quinn's book. There's this Dortmund press officer who says to Klopp, "Oh, my mother's about to turn 90. And Klopp says, "Oh, wow, can I come round and congratulate her?" And the press officer thinks, well, obviously the manager of my club is not going to come to my mother's 90th birthday. He's just saying this. Press officer doesn't mention this again, but weeks later, Klopp comes to him and says, "Your mum's birthday's coming up. Just give me her address and I'll come round." And on the day, there is Jürgen Klopp eating cake and coffee with this 90-year-old lady and her mates.
Jürgen Klopp hijacking your mum's birthday party. But there's a lot of anecdotes like this. We've already mentioned the fans, who are a huge part of the Dortmund identity. And there is some scepticism about Klopp because although, his TV appearances during the World Cup win him a lot of fame, there is a hardcore element of Dortmund fans who think this guy's just a TV guy, right?
Yeah, he's just a celeb.
Yeah, we've just got Michael Richards is now going to manage our team. Yeah. It's not necessarily something they think is a positive.
More charismatic, well-spoken version of Michael Richards, should be said.
So what he does is, so Uli Hesse gives this great anecdote about how Klopp realises that the ultras in Dortmund are perhaps, the most important part of the fan base. Of course they are. These are the hardcore fans of any club. They're often called ultras. So before the season starts, he says he wants to meet the ultras, who are often quite well organised and mobilised. But the leader of a certain fan group isn't able to make the meeting. He's stuck in traffic. And Klopp actually calls him while he's in his car and says, "I know you're on your way to the club. We're not going to start without you. We're going to wait for you to get here before having the meeting." And this guy, of course, who is the gang leader of the ultras, is very touched that Klopp is going to delay his day just so he can get through traffic. There's also brilliant stories and I think even images of Klopp calling up the local companies in the area, most of whom actually buy up the VIP boxes. So these are the corporate boxes, the nice parts of the stadium. And he calls them up before the season starts and says, "You don't know me, but I'm taking over this season. And why have you not renewed your season ticket, your membership for the boxes? We're going to have a brilliant season and you all need to come down." So he's calling up, I don't know, random small businesses, the Mittelstand of the local area.
I don't think Pep Guardiola's doing that, by the way.
I don't think Pep Guardiola or any manager is doing that because he needs money to come into the club and he's already selling them a dream. He's like, "We're going to have one of the best seasons ever. Make sure you renew before the deadline expires." Alex
Ferguson actually did something similar when he was at St Mirren. He drives on a bus, open deck bus around St Mirren, this small town, broadcasting through this megaphone, "Buy tickets to St Mirren this season." He's mortified. He's terribly embarrassed, but he feels
you got to do what you
got
to do. And also, I guess, to ingratiate yourself into the local fabric of a region, German companies are very important to people's identities, and of course they are to Dortmund. So, yeah.
And it goes brilliantly. He builds this young team. He calls it his kindergarten team, and they win the league twice in a row, 2011, 2012.
Which is an incredible feat because, of course, Bayern are the only team that win the Bundesliga.
Yeah, Bayern own the Bundesliga. It's like a wholly owned monopoly, yeah. And so amazingly, Dortmund, the thing is, the first few years, this is Another weird aspect of the Klopp path, which you see at Liverpool as well, the first few years they don't win, but everybody loves him anyway, and they renew his contract till forever. They say, you want to sign a contract till forever? Please be our guest. We never want you to leave even though we're not winning. So they don't win, they love him. Then they win 2 championships in a row, they love him even more. And playing this heavy metal football of total pressing with, I think, the youngest team in Bundesliga history with players like Gundogan and Mario Götze, Robert Lewandowski. They beat Bayern.
There's also a brilliant, I say brilliant, horrifically catchy song, which is coined by one of the, I think he's a pop singer who's a Dortmund fan called Kloppo, the pop star.
Kloppo do pop star is the song. Yeah, you want to sing some of it?
I can't. It's like Baby Shark. It's already embedding itself into the bottom of my brain. But if we can overlay a clip, that would be great.
And what we see at Dortmund, as at Mainz, is a key aspect of how Klopp runs a club, which is that he delegates. He understands, modern football manager, you're not this autocratic king. You're like a chief executive. You have this big staff, dozens of people working for you. And Klopp's job is really to provide the vision, which is this frenzied pressing football. And he says, I like fighting football, not serenity football. Rainy day, heavy pitch, everybody has a dirty face, and then they go home and can't play football for the next 4 weeks. So just mass intensity football. And he's very good on tactical detail, but he really outsources the tactical training and detail to the guy he calls his brain, Željko Buvac, who's this Serbian origin guy. They played together at Mainz. They coached Mainz together. And both at Dortmund and then at Liverpool, Buvac is the guy who kind of implements the Kloppian tactical vision. And so they'd often fight a lot, and in the end they do break up at Liverpool. But in a sense, it was like, 2 hearts in a single breast. They're just total bodies.
That's an excellent feature for leaders to have, the idea that they should not actually be megalomaniacal control freaks.
Like some people we could mention.
Who we are not going to mention because we have offended far too many people in this episode.
I thought you liked offending people.
I pick my targets, okay? And to realise that they are highly, highly qualified people who you pay to do those jobs for you.
Yeah. And it makes it better. They reached the Champions League final in 2013, but of course, and this is the whole history of Germany, they lose to Bayern. Then the last couple of years at Dortmund are not as good. And after the mediocre last season at Dortmund, he does what he always does. He sacks himself. He says, one big head needed to roll, mine. So he takes on the executioner's role, which in football is traditionally played by the chairman. And the fans in the club are devastated. Everyone else wants him to stay forever.
Yeah, he's like, it's not you, it's me.
Yeah, he's always like, it's not you, it's me, and you'll get over this. You'll be happy again one day. And
it's better if I leave.
And the fans are like, no, we will never be happy without you again. And he leaves.
There's a huge amount of self-dramatization that goes on when you guillotine yourself like this. The sacrificial nature of his exits.
But I mean, if you are a cult leader, you do have to respect the fact that there's this enormous collective emotion invested in you. You have to...
it's a big responsibility.
Big responsibility to handle that emotion. I think he genuinely feels that.
Yeah, the mental health of millions of people are reliant on this guy,
Yeah, the whole survival of whole communities depends on Klopp. Yeah. So he leaves.
And the fate of another footballing community...
The footballing community.
Apparently... Liverpudlians, or particularly Liverpool fans, is also now going to be inextricably tied to Jürgen Klopp, and we'll talk about his time at Liverpool after the break.
So, you want to be a marketer. It's easy. You just have to score a ton of leads and figure out a way to turn them all into customers. Plus, manage a dozen channels, write a million blogs, and launch 100 campaigns all at once. When that's done, simply make your socials go viral and bring in record profits. No sweat. Okay, fine. It's a lot of sweat. But with HubSpot's AI-powered marketing tools, launching benchmark-breaking campaigns is easier than ever. Get started at HubSpot.com/marketers.
This is a reminder that you're listening to Heroes and Humans of Football with me, Simon Cooper.
And me, Mehreen Khan.
Welcome back. We've just reached the zenith of Jurgen Klopp's life, which he's about to join Liverpool. Now, Klopp and Liverpool is a love story. And we're all familiar with this false romantic idea that everybody has a soulmate, that there is this other person out there just waiting for you. And at some point in your life, you're going to meet them, you stare into each other's eyes and you realize we were always meant to be together. Now, obviously, when it comes to human meets human, this is bullshit. However, with Klopp and Liverpool, it's actually true. He was always meant to be Liverpool manager. But like with all great romances, Klopp had foreseen, had anticipated that one day he would meet his Liverpool. And so there was this Liverpool-Dortmund friendly at Anfield when he's still Dortmund manager. In the tunnel, he caresses the "This is Anfield" sign.
Obscene.
This is on camera, and Liverpool fans start this Twitter trend, Klopp for the Cop.
Hashtag Klopp for the Cop.
Anthony Quinn tells the story quite well in his very personal fans book called Klopp. There was an Anfield maintenance foreman, a guy called Bert Johnson, decades ago, who said we should put a sign up in the tunnel to the pitch. And they said, yeah, it would be nice. We'll put up a sign saying welcome to Anfield. And Bill Shankly, the manager, says, no, we don't welcome anybody here. It's more like, this is Anfield, we're going to massacre you. So the sign just says, this is Anfield. And Klopp, when he becomes manager of Liverpool, he makes a rule initially that the players are not allowed to touch it because they haven't earned that right. And it's only after they win the Champions League that he gives them the right to
Virgil
touch.
starts doing it, yeah.
They start touching the "This is Anfield" sign, I guess, as a ritual that you get in cults.
I think it's worth reminding ourselves how abjectly underperforming Liverpool are in the period just before Klopp arrives. This is a tough period. Liverpool in the 2000s and 2010s are a club that have consistently failed to live up to the legacy of the great teams.
They haven't won the league since 1990.
Yeah, of the 70s and 80s. So I grew up in an era where Liverpool used to be great, and the people that I know are sort of legacy Liverpool fans because their parents used to support them in that period. But during the period towards the end of the 90s, the 2000s and the early 2010s, they're just crap. This is despite the fact they have totemic players like Steven Gerrard, Luis Suarez, Fernando Torres. They get close, but they can't ever get that Premier League title. And Rodgers, sadly, is the fall guy because he comes close, but then they fail. They just immolate right at the end.
Yeah, I think if we're going to date the lowest point of Liverpool's existence, it's May 2015. This is a few months before Klopp comes, and they lose 6-1 to Stoke in Steven Gerrard's last match. Almighty Stoke, yeah. The end of Brendan Rodgers is long and drawn out, and Liverpool have been looking around for a new manager. And normally in professional football, you know, when they need a new manager, they've sacked the old manager and they need to keep the fans quiet. So they quickly Google, or somebody says, oh yeah, I know so-and-so, I used to work with him, let's hire him, and he's free because he was sacked himself last week. The aim is always that the fans don't blame the board or the owner. They have to blame the manager. And so you have to keep the focus in a bad time.
You always need a fall guy, yeah.
So the manager's the fall guy, and then you have to appoint a new manager fast, like 4 minutes later. But Liverpool don't do this. They identify Jurgen Klopp. They research his last season on Dortmund statistically, and Dortmund had performed badly. They finished 7th, but Liverpool's stats show that they were better than 7th, so it's okay. They invite Klopp to New York to meet some of the investors in Liverpool, which is owned by the Fenway Sports Group of John Henry. And they've done a 60-page report on him about his philosophy, his training sessions, his relationships with players and staff and media. So, you know, nobody in the history of football has done such due diligence on a new manager. So he comes to Liverpool, and most Liverpool fans think Jurgen Klopp rings a very faint bell. People don't really know much about him. And he comes in and he does this kind of legendary opening press conference.
He does. It's absolutely brilliant. There's so many moments in there that are very telling of the kind of manager he's going to become. One of the first ones is his sort of immediate contrast with Mourinho. So I think almost apropos of nothing, he starts calling himself the normal one.
Yeah, he says that at the press conference, I'm the normal one.
Which is to contrast with Mourinho's infamous first press conference where he coins himself as the special one. Klopp, of course, is far from normal, but that's a big part of his shtick, that he's just the everyday guy, the guy the fans love and the players love. He's not a tactical genius. He's just like, you know, a dude that loves the club and is going to do really, really well. And he also does this excellent thing with the press, with the journalists. So he gets in there and he says, you know, I'm in England and I've heard terrible things about how vicious the English press is. and I'm counting on you to prove me wrong. And then there's this little chuckle that goes around the press room, and the journalists kind of look at each other and realise that this guy is going to be a bit of a gift. And he does exactly the same thing at Mainz. So where everyone at Mainz thinks that he's an April Fool's Day joke, he also charms the living hell of the 7 journalists that come and initially think that he's a practical joke, and he wins them over. And this relationship with the media, I think, is one of the themes that mean that Klopp, perhaps, I imagine, hasn't attracted as much scrutiny as other managers. I think the press love him because he gives them such great copy and content, and he realises how important the media is going to be.
And then he has this gift of speech. He arrives at Liverpool and he speaks this excellent English, which he says he's learned from watching Friends. And without it, I don't think he would really be able to be the manager he is, because so much of what he does relies on finding the exact right words, which he can in German and in English. So you've got this alpha male who has a gift for empathy and a gift for community. And one thing that Klopp exudes is he just feels really good about himself. And he says this thing, confidence is my hobby. He's just a very, very confident man who's totally happy with who he is. And that allows him every day to go in public and be fully himself. And people always respond to somebody who is really being himself. It's just totally who he is. You can't fake being Klopp for 9 years. It'd be exhausting to fake it for 25 minutes, but he just is who he is for 9 years.
There is this fad of authenticity, which you now see on the internet, where everyone's fake. So everyone strives for authenticity. But this guy, he just has it.
So everyone at Liverpool loves him from day one. He moves in to Formby, which is a small place on the coast, with his second wife, Ula, who's a children's book author. Liverpool don't really do very well for the first 2 or 3 years. It's not great. They do get to the Champions League final 2018, which they lose to Real Madrid. And that's the 6th consecutive defeat in a final for Klopp, carrying on from his Dortmund era. And so people talk about Klopp's curse. So the critics are saying, yeah, he's a really charismatic guy. He doesn't really win that much, does he? And he's had 2 or 3 fairly mediocre years at Liverpool by this point.
He's not clutch, as the kids say.
That's the critique. I mean, I think losing finals is a fairly random...
arbitrary, yeah.
It's not something that says much about you. In a final, you typically have a 50% chance of winning. It's like tossing a coin 6 times. Sometimes you can get 6
But
tails.
again, I feel like in defeat, especially that Champions League final, which was tragic on so many counts for Karius and Salah and Liverpool, he's so good in defeat. I think that's when you see, like, you know, peak Klopp. He's able to use sadness, the emotion of getting close and never quite making it, and create this rallying effect that we're going to use the pain to be better, and we are going to be better, and eventually it will come, and when it happens it will be so much better because of all of the pain that we suffered. Like, he's really, really good at that. Like, I cry after big football matches.
Really?
I'm inconsolable sometimes, but if someone like Klopp is around to do the post-match
You
interview,
cry now as a semi-adult when Chelsea lose?
no, now it just turns into anger and bitterness. But
Right,
I've
yeah,
spent a
that's
lot of
more
my
grown
early
up,
years, up until my probably early 20s, crying over games that I lose, never winning.
Right.
But when you see Klopp coming out to do the post-match press, he makes you feel better.
Well, I think what he understood is that he has to turn himself into the embodiment of the club he leads, of the institution he leads. He understands football is about results, but it's also about creating community. So a lot of managers come in and say, you know, I'm a technocrat, I know how to win football matches, which is often incorrect. But Klopp says, yeah, I'm a technocrat, I know how to win football matches, but I also love Liverpool. I'm not from here, I'm an outsider, but my job is to understand what the club means to everyone involved in it, and then to be that, to embody that with his, you know, exceptional ability, his charisma, and his kind of ability to be very publicly himself and to display every emotion he feels, from anger to pain to love to laughter.
And I think he does that thing where the crying is helpful because it helps him not dwell too much on the sadness. So before the Champions League final, they also lose the final of the Europa League the season before. And like most clubs, you always anticipate that you're going to win. So you set up the post-match trophy parade and the open-top bus and also the party that you're going to have. So Klopp decides that they're not going to cancel the party that they've organised in the bar after losing to Swabia. They're still going to go. So he makes the players attend. And when he gets there, he realises they're all sulking. So Jordan Henderson describes being there and everyone's very subdued. Nobody wants to chat to each other, make eye contact. They've just lost. And Klopp makes them with this incredible speech, which ends in this rousing rendition of We Are Liverpool. He gets them all on the dance floor and he gets them all believing that this is going to be a successful team that are going to win. He creates a sense of inevitability around them, and defeat is just part of the Hollywood movie where you have to lose a little bit to get to greatness in the end. And he also does this at Mainz. So the season that they lose out on promotion, he tells the whole city who gather after the end of the season that we need your support and you guys are going to have to help us do another charge for promotion the next season. And when they arrive in pre-season for their first game of training, up to 50,000 people turn up to watch Mainz train.
In a town of 200,000.
Yeah, basically most people in town are there. And that's because he said to them, and they remembered a few weeks earlier that we need your support, and they turn up in their numbers. He knows that he has his power to mobilize huge amounts of emotion. I mean, the man could lead armies, you know?
Yeah, no, I mean, he could be a very if he decided to become a kind of crazy extremist political leader, his party would win the elections.
But actually, it could happen,
morning.
you know, serious.
No, he's not, fortunately, he's not crazy, so he's not going to do that. I mean, what people will remember most, I think, is his expressions of joy. So we all have images of Klopp crying, but you also have these images of Klopp celebrating and beating his chest. And then all the players run and hug him, and then he loses his glasses. That's why, I mean, he doesn't need the glasses. He's had laser surgery like 30 years ago. But these hyper-fit young men in their 20s run up and essentially charge this man in his mid to late 50s. Then he's jumping around with them, and you remember he gave that piggyback to Sadio Mane?
Yeah.
And he's so happy in his own body. And I mean, you know, as somebody of a similar age, I'm thinking I'm glad I'm not part of these celebrations. But yeah, Klopp celebrating is great Klopp.
Yeah, it's just unadulterated joy.
And he also just exudes this energy. So at half time, he immediately sprints into the tunnel. And you think, why sprint into the tunnel? Nobody sprints into the tunnel. And Jamie Carragher has said, I think it's because he wants to get a quick cigarette before he addresses the team. So he sprints in to have a cigarette. What you get is this sense of high energy, which is also mirrored by how Liverpool play on the field. So he's not just channeling the feel of the fans, he's also channeling the vibe of the players.
They run, you know, record after record. Liverpool players run the most kilometres in a 90-minute match.
And he judges them partly on how many kilometres they run, which is very unusual.
Yeah.
You know, Anthony Quinn, I keep coming back to him because it just is a really good book about Klopp. And Quinn says he looks like he's having fun and that he's funny. And this having fun thing, Klopp says, yeah, I'm a Protestant. His mother is Protestant. And so he's been raised a Protestant. And he says, as a Christian, I see life as a gift. And he very much exudes that feeling that he's just really happy to be there.
Do we think he's religious or he's kind of culturally
He sees himself
Christian?
as religious, yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
So in our episode about Guardiola, we talk about how he sees players as instruments. You have to say the right things to a player, manipulate him a certain way to get him to perform for you. And Mourinho obviously does that as well in Mourinho's own way. Yes, Klopp also sees players as instruments for his success, the team's success, but he also regards them as humans, and that's a big part of how he works. At one point, the fullback, Andy Robertson, is going to become a father soon, and a staff member shows that he doesn't know that. He doesn't know that Robertson's wife is expecting. And Klopp says, how can you not know that? That is the biggest thing in his life now, because Klopp always wants to know everything about his players. He says, I want to know who they are, what they believe in, how they've reached this point, what drives them, what awaits them when they depart training. And he says, I'm not faking this. He says, I'm really interested because he has this enormous social energy, this emotional energy for other people. And so when he meets the player the first time, he doesn't say, oh, you know, I like the overlapping runs you make and I want you to do more of them. He says, so tell me about yourself. Where do you come from? Who are you?
And it's not just the players that he cares about. He also, when he arrives at Liverpool, makes a concerted effort to make sure that everyone who's part of the club is included.
At Melwood, at the training centre, he introduces the players to the staff, which doesn't seem to have happened before. And the message is, look, we're all in this together, whether you're the kit man or, you know, the fourth physio or Mohamed Salah, we're all on the same team.
Pep Linders, who's his Dutch assistant,
Pep Linders.
Yes, who's written a book, who's also written a book about his time at Liverpool, and he's still with him, says that there's a saying, quote, that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And I think everyone who works with Jürgen has the feeling he really cares about you and your development. And this is a kind of theme around emotional intelligence and empathy, which I think someone like Carlo Ancelotti also exhibits a lot of. But It's still pretty rare, I think, in football management. Well,
football managers are very ruthless people. I mean, they'll end someone's career in an instant. They'll get rid of the player who's not performing. And Klopp does that too. He's also ruthless. But while you're there, he loves you. And Dejan Lovren captures this slight ambiguity. He said, Klopp's your friend, but he's not your best friend, meaning he's your friend now. But still, Klopp isn't faking it. He's fully himself as a leader. He genuinely cares about his players, and people sense that he's never pretending to be someone he's not. And so even when they're losing, everyone at Liverpool loves him, same as at his previous clubs. So in 2016, the club extends the contracts of Klopp and his assistants, Buvac and Peter to 2022. They give him a 6-year extension, even though performances are not good.
You know, the first couple of seasons are tough, but it doesn't take too long for Liverpool to really start becoming into the dominant force that they still are today.
Yeah, and in 2018, that's the turnaround with hindsight. And they have this massive break that they sell Felipe Coutinho, who at the time is regarded as their star player, to Barcelona for £105 million up front plus add-ons. And essentially, Coutinho will never play a good game for the rest of his career.
He's now in Qatar, I think.
Oh, God, poor guy. And with this money and more, they splash out. They just go big with money. And they buy Virgil van Dijk, they buy Alisson, so they finally have a decent keeper. They buy Fabinho. Klopp's team start with defence. He's a very attacking coach, but he believes it all starts with defensive organisation. And once Virgil van Dijk, who is second best Dutch player of our generation after Frenkie de Jong, is there, it's onwards and upwards.
And the goalkeeper is very important because, of course, Karius becomes such a figure of fun that it's the old adage, you're not going to win anything with a goalkeeper that is liable to a mistake every other game.
And now no more mistakes, and they build this team that plays this high pressing game that he's dreamed of. And one sign of this is that they never even need to foul anymore. They don't get red cards. They win the Fair Play League for fewest red and yellow cards every year for about 3 or 4 years running, because what they're doing is they're defending outside the other team's penalty area, and they have such a tight press that they don't need to tackle. The other team just can't pass the ball through them, so they keep getting interceptions, and they never need to foul.
The hipsters learn their new favourite word.
Gegenpressing.
Gegenpressing. It's everywhere.
Yes. So
we haven't even used it yet.
Yeah, it's one of these German words that escapes German, like Schadenfreude, Auf Wiedersehen.
Yeah.
And so Gegenpressing means pressing against, which is also about this. It's good to lose the ball up front because then the other team have it and you can press them. And it works brilliantly. And then we come to the kind of climactic or the first
big climax of this team.
They've lost 3-0 in Barcelona in the first leg of the Champions League 2019. And it's obviously over. Messi puts in a free kick from 30 yards. There's no way you come back from 3-0 against Barcelona. Klopp comes into the changing room after the 3-0 defeat. He shouts at the players who are all sitting there slumped over. He shouts, boys, we're not the best team in the world. Now you know that. Maybe they are. Who cares? We can still beat best team in the world. Let's go again.
Yeah.
So before the return leg at Liverpool, he tells the players, look, we're 3-0 down. Just try. If we can do it, wonderful. If not, then fail in the most beautiful way. And he says, I don't think it's possible, but because it's you, I think we have a chance. And so what he's doing is he's lifting the players, but he's also lifting the pressure. He's saying, guys, you're allowed to fail. You don't have to come back from 3-0 down. And again, this is a wonderful example of Klopp's leadership. You inspire people, you make them feel anything is possible, but you're not putting pressure on them. You're kind of saying to them, be your best selves in the same way that he is his best self every day. I mean, he says something like, I am the best version of myself now. And that's what he wants his players to be. Just go out and play against Barcelona, have a wonderful time, be your best you. But if you lose, it's okay. And so he gives people this kind of personal liberation. He always, to the outside world, puts pressure on himself, not on his players. And inside, he does that too.
Pep Lijnders, his assistant, has done a great dissection of the match and the tactics. And he says that just after the game at the Camp Nou, he gets a call, Lijnders, from a former assistant of Klopp's at Borussia Dortmund. And he tells him, look, Pep, I've watched the game and you guys can turn this around and you're the only team that can turn this around. And they turn it around by doing the thing that they've been doing for the last 2 seasons, which is playing exactly the same style of football. Lijnders describes us as we were pressing, but chasing to win the ball back, right? So we're not just pressing to harry the defenders. There is a goal to this, and that is that we have to regain possession high up the pitch in the opposition's half. And he says Klopp doesn't actually change his tactics based on who they're playing. And the quote that he uses is that we're not going to be the best team in the world. We just need to beat the best team in the world at this point, Barcelona and Messi. And they do it without Salah. They do it playing people like Shaqiri, who's a second string player, Divock Origi, who becomes a cult hero for scoring the winning goal.
We should pause on the winning goal because it's the most famous goal of Klopp's Liverpool period, which is Trent Alexander-Arnold's about to take a corner. He walks away from the ball and the Barcelona players relax and they're not quite ready. And then very quickly, Alexander-Arnold turns around and hits this hard low pass to Divock Origi, The Barcelona defence is not there, and Henry puts it in the net.
And pandemonium ensues.
Yes, although Klopp didn't see it. Klopp has his back to the field at that point, so people have to explain to him what happened.
Not deliberately, because he does that for penalties.
He doesn't watch penalties. No, he was just distracted, and he wasn't watching like the Barcelona defence were not watching. So he misses the best goal of his whole tenure. Because the final, so they beat Barcelona, and the final against Spurs is this most boring match ever.
Tepid, yeah.
Liverpool win 2-0, less said about it, the better. But finally you get this kind of, so they win the Champions League.
They were the two greatest semi-finals of history, right? So we have Tottenham overturning their deficit against Ajax.
Yeah, I would say the most horrendous
about that.
event in modern football history. Yeah, I was glad Spurs didn't win. They did not deserve, having destroyed Ajax's dream. It shouldn't have been allowed.
Oh, a little bit of bitterness from you. Some emotion. And irrationality.
I invest emotion in Dutch football. We just hadn't come to Dutch football.
Finally, there's me
podcast.
thinking throughout this whole podcast that you're just some cold-hearted, cerebral guy who thinks football's like going to the ballet.
Well, that's the Dutch idea of football.
No, but you actually do care.
I do care, yeah. I care about Dutch football. Just wait till we come to our Johan Cruyff episode.
Oh, God.
Yeah. I just don't care about all these other players and coaches.
No, but you're doing that thing that they piss you off so much that you wanted Tottenham to lose.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. You are a human being.
So they won the Champions League. It's Klopp's first. He finally has not lost a final. And so he allows the players to touch the Welcome to Anfield sign, which is obviously a milestone.
This is all a bit perverse on the Anfield sign, but sure, let's go with it.
No, I mean, it's just part of being in a cult or in a religion. You have these, it's like touching the saints' toes.
Yeah. All those, what are those locks of hair from saints and shit?
Yeah, it's a very Catholic ritual, although he's a Protestant leading a cult in a historically Catholic city, so there's some complexity there. And in fact, when he signs his new contract in 2019, worth 15 million quid a year, he says, well, money is not the main thing for me, but it does matter. He says, I am not Mahatma Gandhi. But I mean, I like the comparison because he's consciously comparing himself to other spiritual leaders. And in fact, only 2 foreigners have been given the freedom of the city of Liverpool.
Okay.
So, starter for one, who's the first one and who's the second one?
Foreigner.
Yeah, 2 foreigners. One is Klopp, who is a foreigner, and the other is Nelson Mandela.
Oh, okay. Of course,
only Klopp and Nelson Mandela are foreigners who have the freedom of the city of Liverpool. So that's the kind of
that's the level he's
company
at.
He keeps. Yeah. And even more so, I mean, he probably goes above Mandela and Gandhi when they win the league in 2020.
Mandela never won no leagues. Exactly.
No. So they win the league in 2020.
It's a COVID hit season.
Yeah, so normally you'd say Klopp winning the league at Liverpool after 30 years, they would celebrate for about 30 years. They just have this kind of permanent open-top bus going through town. But because it's COVID, nobody's allowed out. And Klopp, as a kind of spiritual leader, appeals to people not to go out. He says celebrate in your own home or in front of your own. Get vaccinated,
wear a mask, stay at home.
Yeah, he actually does a lot of commenting on COVID. He does a lot of public health. Yeah.
But it was a COVID season when I remember thinking, God, this team is really good. And that's because in the COVID seasons, there were no crowds. And so the one thing that you could do that you could never do before is hear what the players are saying on the pitch. Chelsea played Liverpool. I think they battered us, of course. What I noticed was that the Liverpool players and Klopp were always constantly communicating with each other. They were always giving each other instructions. Van Dijk was always telling his fullbacks where to be. He was positioning everyone, marshalling on the pitch. Chelsea, absolutely silent.
Really, that's
you couldn't hear a word. Right. And that's when I thought, okay, these guys are pretty special. They're doing something that we're not doing. And you wouldn't be able to usually discern that in a normal season.
Yeah, having players sending important tactical messages in real time is massive. It also shows that they understand football.
And crap teams don't talk to each other.
Yeah. So here we have Klopp at his zenith. In 12 months, they've won the Champions League, and now they've won this first league title in 30 years. He's also adored by an entire region of England. And you think it might go to your head a bit. And many football managers are megalomaniacs with an unrealistic self-image. But Klopp is quite rare in that even in this moment, he doesn't take himself too seriously because he loves football, but he knows football's not really important. So he said once, I'm afraid of someone in my family getting ill, but I'm not afraid of anything else in life. There is nothing so important to me that I could not bear to lose it. And that's why I find there is no reason to fear. So he doesn't fear not winning the title. He just thinks, great, we could win the title. Now we've won the title. That's brilliant. And so there's this very kind of positive attitude to success. Like, he really enjoys being him. He really enjoys winning stuff. and he doesn't kind of labour under this enormous pressure and anxiety.
I'm going to put it down to his God-fearingness. Of course, I'm biased on this.
Yeah, because you're a God-fearing person
But
yourself,
if you are
yeah.
a God-fearing person, one, it's very difficult for you to develop a God complex, which he doesn't.
Yeah,
he doesn't have a savior complex, and he realizes that ultimately he's just a dude. And it's a great putting things into perspective thing. So I'm going to put that, you can take him as a centrist dad, but I'm going to take him as a monotheist. So technically I'm also going to claim him.
Right.
In my camp.
So you're saying, ultimately, I'm just a dude. He's the Jürgen Klopp self-image, but is also at the core of all great religions.
Yes. At least monotheistic ones. I can't profess to speak about the other ones.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
One person with whom he has a kind of soulmate relationship is Alex Ferguson of the enemy, Man United. And when Klopp wins Manager of the Year, Ferguson tells him in a video message, your personality runs right through the whole club. Of course, Ferguson's also talking about himself, but that is what Klopp has done at Liverpool. I'm interested in the parallels between Ferguson, Klopp and Shankly, not just as managers, but also as self-consciously left-wing figures. So they all see themselves as broadly on the left, and Ferguson would always campaign for Labour and advise Labour. Maybe these managers who are the most devoted to building their clubs and fan bases into a kind of working class community, these guys, Klopp, Shankly, Ferguson, that it's a kind of modern left-wing image, the idea that the football club is the last vestige of working class solidarity, of having values beyond money, especially in a historically left-wing area like Liverpool. It's been left-wing for a century. Yeah, so Klopp it doesn't go to his head. And, while COVID's spreading, and a journalist says, what do you think about this new COVID thing, which is a ridiculous question. Klopp, to his credit, he says, you should listen to experts. You shouldn't listen to people with no knowledge like me. He says, I wear a baseball cap and have a bad shave. Why are you trying to get my views on COVID? And again, Klopp believes in delegation. He believes that experts should be managing this pandemic. He cares deeply about this. He's very emotionally involved in politics. He said he'd never vote for a party of the right. He'd never vote for a party that promised to cut the top rate of taxes. But he says, look, I'm just a guy. As you say, ultimately, I'm just a dude, I think is the Kloppian.
And he does a lot
worldview.
to reject his cult leader status, right? He tells people, don't worship me. I'm just not important enough.
He says essentially, I'm not the Messiah, I'm just a naughty boy.
Yeah. He also comes out in kind of in oblique terms as a Remainer, which must have been...
he was quite clear that he thought Brexit was stupid.
Yeah, but he doesn't say, he says it in a relatively nuanced way where he knows that he doesn't want to offend too many people, which must have been the moment you completely fell head over heels in love with him.
I think Klopp is great, but since he's not a creation of Dutch football, I would argue ultimately he is a creation of Dutch football.
Of course, you're like the Indian dad, everything effectively just comes down to being a derivative
he is
Dutch
a derivative
football.
of Cruyff. So this kind of high-pressing game was invented by the Dutch in the 70s. And in fact, Klopp has this video made of pressing through time. And it starts with the Dutch team of the 1970s.
Pressing a history.
And there's this amazing, it's kind of the first pressing ever captured on camera. It's Holland-Uruguay 1974 World Cup. And this Uruguayan defender has the ball and he's looking around thinking, I wonder what I'm going to do with this ball. And then 5 Dutchmen in these very bright orange shirts, these kind of headache-inducing shirts, they jump him. It is like people jumping out of a bush to ambush you. And the guy he's kind of left on the floor and he's history. His whole view of football is past. That's where Klopp starts.
We have so much to thank the Netherlands for, even the chocolate sprinkles.
Dutch football is the greatest gift to civilization, and Klopp knows that. So in 2020, he's not just the winner of the league, the winner of the Champions League. He's also the best human to manage a football club. He's like winner of the best human award in football. It can't get better than this. He's reached an apogee.
In the last part of the show, we like to talk about legacy, which we will do. But with Klopp, of course, we also have to talk about what's coming next because his story isn't over. But he said at the beginning of this year, Simon, that he was going to depart Liverpool in, of course, Kloppian fashion. He fired himself.
Yeah, so he always fires himself. And it's a leadership lesson because, of course, in the modern world, we have many leaders who hang around like a bad smell and they just don't want to leave. Everyone wants them to leave, but they're like, no, the world needs me. Klopp gives this leadership lesson in how to leave at the right time with dignity. So on January 26, 2024, it's a sad day and it's a beautiful day. And Liverpool issued this video where he explains his resignation and again, finding exactly the right words. He doesn't appear to be reading a script. He doesn't even appear to have memorized it. He just says exactly what he means to say. He says, I came here as a normal guy. I'm still a normal guy. So he's evoking his very first press conference. I just don't live a normal life for too long now. And I don't want to wait until I'm too old to have a normal life. And I need at least to give it a try at one point to see how it is. So he's saying, guys, just let me retreat. Let me sack myself, please. And it was very strange because here is a man who exudes energy. He has this excess energy that you blast out of an exhaust pipe. And he's saying, I don't have enough energy anymore. And he finds exactly this right metaphor. He says, I'm a proper sports car, not the best, but a pretty good one, can still drive 160, 70, 80 miles an hour. But I am the only one who sees the tank needle is going down. So he's really saying, this is how you leave, guys. This is how you should do it.
And there's a contrast with political careers. Of course, the adage is that all political careers end in failure, and all managerial careers actually do end in failure
Except
as well.
Klopp's managerial careers always end in kind of mass communal emotion.
And he's the only person that has actually bucked that trend. We've spoken about Pep in previous episodes. Pep basically has said that he would continue in perpetuity unless Man City get charged with some terrible financial crimes. He's going to stay.
Yeah, he's going to be there age 107.
And because if you're a robot like Pep, you can do it. But because Klopp's a human, humans need time off. They
I would
need
argue
breaks.
that even Pep is a human. It just doesn't really show.
He doesn't allow himself to that luxury to say that he's a human being who needs some downtime, who's exhausted. And we have seen it in a few political careers. So I think the New Zealandish Prime Minister,
Jacinda Ardern, she left. And the Irish Prime Minister,
following
Leo Varadkar,
Klopp's active example, a few weeks later says that he's going to stand down as Taoiseach. And so maybe he's starting a new cultist trend of people walking away from their jobs.
You think Leo Varadkar saw Klopp's video and thought, let me do that?
Of course he did.
Brilliant. Yeah, maybe
Definitely.
Rishi Sunak next.
Please, Rishi.
He leaves beloved, and he leaves after a long time. He leaves after building a relationship. So 7 years at Mainz, 7 years at Dortmund, 9 years at Liverpool. And the fans are like, you can't leave.
You can't do this to us.
We were always going to be together. It's very, very beautiful. He says it out straight like Klopp would. He says, because nobody will sack me, I have to make this decision by myself. So he has to sack himself. And he says, I'm not the right one for the future of Liverpool, which again is what other people are supposed to say about you. It's not what you're supposed to say about yourself.
Yeah.
And he says he wants to have a look at how life is because I don't know. He says, I don't know how life is. I've been inside this machine for 24 years.
We shouldn't also overlook the fact that this Liverpool team, despite only 2 major triumphs, a Champions League and a Premier League. Simon, you've worked out that statistically they've actually been the second best team in domestic football of all time in this era.
So a lot of anti-Liverpool people listening to this will say, oh, Mehreen and Simon are just joined the hype machine. Here's a guy who's only ever won one league title in 9 years, same as Claudio Ranieri. Why have you fallen for the hype, the Klopp PR machine? But I have data from the most intelligent man in journalism, my Financial Times colleague, your former FT colleague, John Byrne-Murdoch. So John has these stats about Liverpool under Klopp, and he says they are the second best team in England this century. But their problem is they're playing at exactly the same time as the best team, which is Pep's Man City. Essentially, John has looked at the points totals and goals scored, goal difference, shots, all the important stats of all the English teams since 2000. And Klopp are the best in every category except for Pep City. They're better. Pep City and Klopp's Liverpool are better across all the metrics than peak Ferguson's United, peak Wenger's Arsenal, peak anybody's Chelsea. Klopp's Liverpool are the second best team. So they've only won one league title, not because they're not very good, but because they're playing against the best team.
It also meets the eye test, all these statistics. And I would argue that on one metric, Liverpool usurp City because I think they are the most watchable and entertaining team that I've probably ever seen in the 25 years of watching Premier League football. So of course I watch my own team, but every time there's a Liverpool game on, I want to watch it. Honestly, you could not really even pay me to watch City week in, week out. I find it incredibly boring. They dominate possession. They play their tiki-taka. They always score loads of goals. They rarely concede goals. Liverpool are box office. They could do anything. They can be losing 3-0 at half-time and you have to watch the second half because there's a pretty big chance that they're going to win this game 4-3. The entertainment value is huge. I think heavy metal football and what Klopp has created is you can't take your eyes off it. And I think that's a pretty big accolade at a time when the dominant teams, I think Arsenal are becoming a bit like this as well, play a style of football which for the neutral is pretty difficult to watch. It's very beautiful, but it's not entertaining.
Yeah, Klopp's Liverpool in a way are more in the English tradition of this very high energy, high pace football. but with this Cruyffian pressing and, beautiful technical players. To some degree also they've been unlucky in Europe because he has reached 4 Champions League finals, including in his time at Dortmund. He's won 1 and, finals, a bit of luck here and there, Ramos's elbow on Karius's court and Ramos is sent off or whatever. There's a lot of luck and he could have had generational success in notching up Champions Leagues. Still, it's been pretty wonderful. But even when they lose, and to me this is another tribute to Klopp, even when his teams are losing, all the constituencies that make up a club, the directors, the players, the staff, the fans, the media, they all want him around. And he makes ruthless decisions like any top manager does. He gets rid of players, but he doesn't make any enemies. He never alienates people. Even if he hadn't won, he would still have been this unforgettable, joyous figure. And Anthony Quinn, Liverpool fan, says in his book that he'd have been happier winning nothing with Klopp. And Liverpool went 3 years winning nothing with Klopp at the beginning, than winning stuff with any other manager. So this guy, I think the highest we can put it, he is the most popular German in England, even including the British royal family, who are the Germans, as Prototype magazine called them.
That's another people we've managed to piss off, the monarchs. And, it's worth talking about other emotional managers or over-emotional managers. The one that comes to mind for me is Antonio Conte, who, every time Chelsea scored a goal, he just bomb himself into the crowd. But there was something about Conte that emotion had a dark side. It had a bitterness about it. He made loads of enemies. So it's not just a given that just because you're an emotional guy, people are going to love you. That's also, when you're emotional, it also means you're going to lash out at people. It means you're quite quick to anger. And Klopp generally hasn't really exhibited much of these characteristics.
Yeah, and a really good test of who a manager really is what do the staff and the players and the directors think of him, because they deal with him all the time. And half the players are not playing. Half the players have been put on the bench by this manager. And what you see at Klopp's clubs is all these people love him. So when he leaves Dortmund, the Dortmund sporting director or their general manager, Watzke, I think it's Hans-Joachim Watzke, he sort of breaks down at the press conference where Klopp sacks himself. And Watzke can hardly cope, even though Dortmund have been losing. And he gives Klopp this big hug and he says, we will always be friends. We will always be together. So all the people at the club who know Klopp most intimately also seem to love him. It's not just the fans watching from afar.
Even with Mainz to this day, if Mainz are playing a big game or they've got a cup final, Klopp records a video message to tell, to rally up the Mainz fans and the Mainz players. And another figure we're going to talk about, Thomas Tuchel, doesn't do that and is unable to muster that level of love and adoration. But when we talk about legacy, I think it's important to talk about Dortmund, of course, every hipster's favourite club. But Klopp did really set the foundations for what Dortmund have become, which is a prime destination for some of the world's best young footballers. We know that from Jude Bellingham and Jadon Sancho. But if you're a young player in any league in Europe,
quite
and
a useful
Haaland, of
young
course,
player.
Yeah, not too bad. Klopp helped make Dortmund a prime destination for so much of this talent and created a business model where Dortmund now thrive because they're able to attract these young teenagers and then sell them on for huge fees. And it's become a very sustainable business model for a club that was basically on the verge of bankruptcy when he decides to join them in the mid-2010s.
Maybe the ultimate test is, would you have liked to have had him at Chelsea?
Yes.
Even more than Mourinho, who won stuff for you?
Oh, so Mourinho we've already had, so I don't know if it's a question of either or, but right now I think Chelsea need a new manager. Jürgen Klopp is available. He's already said that he would never manage another club in England out of fealty towards Liverpool, and of course I believe him. I think that is true. I don't think he's going to go back on his word. But I don't think there's any real football fan that would say that they would not want Klopp at their club.
I think that's true, and that brings us to the question, so what does Klopp do? So there's one scenario where he's about to turn 57, and he says, I've done it. It's over. And he himself has talked about this dream of relaxing with his children and grandchildren in a big house in the sun, not working anymore. Now, I have to say, this is a very standard fantasy that workaholics have. They think, well, I'm a workaholic now, but, I'm going to quit, and then I'm just going to contemplate life, and they can't do it.
No.
And they're unable to do it. So Mourinho also talks about retiring to the Algarve at 50 or something, and it obviously is never going to happen. So I think Klopp has to keep working. It's just in him. And he says in his passing video that he needs to find a different purpose. And he says, right now, I'd say, if asked, will you ever work as a manager again? I would say no. But of course, that's just the kind of exhaustion speaking. But I think after 2 days of walking his dog on the beach at Formby, he's going to be checking his phone for messages.
Spain is a destination, an obvious one, but you don't think that would actually work for him?
Yeah, I think Klopp's greatness as a manager and as a figure is his ability with language. And he has it in German and in English, and he wouldn't have it in Spanish. And so I think he wouldn't be Klopp through an interpreter. He just couldn't do what he wants to do, which is kind of own a community.
He's a bit snookered in the fact that he said out of loyalty to the teams that he's managed, he won't manage other teams in England and Germany, which would suggest that he can only go back to Dortmund or Mainz.
Has he said he's not going to manage any other German teams?
Not explicitly, but he kind of gives that feeling that he wouldn't do that. He can't go off and manage Bayern, can he?
Well, I was reading the speculation in Germany, and I read this one article in Die Zeit which said he's the ideal Germany manager. Germany have underperformed for a decade. They always have these poor excuses as to why they lost again. And Klopp is this kind of proven German commodity. He wants to work a bit less. Well, as national team manager, you can have kind of long mornings in bed, and you know. And so it would be perfect for him, a kind of man of his age sort of job. And the whole nation would love him, and he would unify the nation, etc. I think the timing might be wrong for that. I think Nagelsmann is going to extend his contract. But I think that's a feasible option.
So we often ask, what would our protagonists be doing if they weren't in football? What do you think, Simon?
Well, Klopp has mused on this question himself, and he says he's lucky he lives in an era when his one big ability, managing a football club, is in demand. Because obviously if somebody like that is born in an era when there's no football, what do you do? So he said 500 years ago, I could have danced in front of the king, probably. That's it. Then I'd be back sleeping in the street.
He'd be a court jester.
It evokes the former Germany manager Berti Vogts once said, Germans dance like refrigerators. Vogts was talking about why Brazilian football is beautiful and German football isn't. He said Germans dance like refrigerators. And I think Klopp probably dances a bit like a refrigerator, maybe one of those massive refrigerators that you get in supermarket back rooms. I don't think he would have been a court jester. I don't think he would dance in front of the king. I think that if he hadn't been a football manager, he would have been the most popular mayor in Germany, definitely for a party of the left.
The SPD?
Maybe even further left, Die Linke.
I think he'd go for Die Linke.
Yeah, he'd be right out
remnant
there.
of themselves. And maybe he'd go off and manage St. Pauli.
Yeah,
and then every left-wing hipster football
left-wing,
dream would become, the apotheosis of all those fantasies in one.
The other question we ask is, would you like to spend an evening with Jürgen Klopp? Now, my feeling is I find hyper-energetic extroverts exhausting to be around.
Is this why you don't like hanging out with me?
Well, I mean, Klopp is like you on steroids, right?
I am also on steroids. No, I'm not on steroids. I'm not on steroids. I'm going to blood test me before the next podcast.
Let's keep that one in, please.
You're basically a killjoy, isn't it?
I am a killjoy, but yeah, I would say Klopp
Can you be too much? You could do 10 minutes. I think you could do 10 minutes.
The thing is, he's so charming that if I was there, I'd be thinking, wow, and maybe I could move in here and just stay here forever just to be around you, which seems to be the feeling everybody gets with Klopp. So you would like to hang out with him?
Yeah, for me, it's, the energy, the charisma, all of it. I want to see it. I think we could have a very serious conversation about God. I would really like to get into this question about how much he believes and why that might actually be the crux of why he hasn't become a complete maniac, despite having the love adoration of millions and millions of people who unconditionally will always be Klopp supporters. Whatever he does, he can do no wrong.
Thank you for listening to Heroes and Humans of Football. For more information, go to our website at heroesandhumans.com.
And follow us at Heroes and Humans on all social platforms.
Next week's episode is on Mohammed bin Salman, Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, probably the most powerful person in football who doesn't even like football. Available next Thursday on all your favourite podcast platforms.
This show was developed by Immaterial and produced by One Fine Play. Matt Cheney is the series producer. Kazra Firuzia is the editor and producer. We have been your hosts, Mehreen Khan
and Simon Cooper.
And this has been Heroes and Humans of Football.